How's it going, Pastor Andrew, coming at you with another thought of the week. This week it kind of continues on with what I talked about last week when we were talking about resilience. Let me ask yourself this question, because I ask myself this question more often than not sometimes. But do we ever have to go and do something, or we're asked to do something, and we're just kind of asked the question of, what's the point? Why do I have to go and do this? Oftentimes, I think of a little kid. They get about age 4 or 5, and then they start asking the question, why? Why do I have to do this? Why is this the way that it is? They ask the question of why? And you get to the point, parents, where you're just like, stop asking why, just go do it and stop. You know, a lot of times I remember when I was a junior enlisted soldier in the military and going, this is stupid. Why are we doing it this way? Why are we doing this? We don't have a big picture understanding of why we're doing something that seems meaningless. We ask ourselves the question of, what's the point? Why do I have to do this? Oftentimes it's something that is difficult. It's something that we're going to struggle with. And the big question when we ask that is, why do I have to struggle through all of this stuff when I don't see a benefit at the end? When I think about this question of why, I can't help but think of Moses, who led the people of Israel through a lot of trying times, got them out of Egypt, gave them the Ten Commandments, put up with all of their stuff, and had to face the consequences of the Israelites' sin, even though Moses didn't sin. And we see Moses in the book of Exodus, where he strikes the rock to cause the Israelites to get water. And he strikes it once, and no water comes out. So instead of being patient, he disobeys God and strikes the rock a second time. And then God gets frustrated and mad at Moses and tells Moses, hey, you're not entering the promised land because of your disobedience. Just think about that for a second. I feel like if I was Moses in that situation, I'd be like, okay, why am I still being punished, God? Why am I still having to wander in the desert and put in all of this effort if I'm not going to get the end result of getting to go to the promised land? I think a lot of times in our life, whether it's our personal life, our work life, our spiritual life, relationships, we get stuck with that mentality of why. Especially in relationships, we think that it's about us. We focus and we ask ourselves the question of, when do I get a reward? When do I get the recognition that I think I deserve? Why should I put in all of this effort for somebody that I don't think is going to reciprocate it? Or when we're at work, why should I put in all of this effort for something that doesn't really matter? I look at Moses and I respect the guy for continuing to lead the people of Israel, knowing that he's not going to get that earthly reward of getting to go to the promised land. But ultimately, his reward is going to be in heaven. And again, that's something that's so cliche that we hear so many times because we're frustrated, we're impatient. We don't understand that we might do something now, but we're not going to be rewarded for it now. We will be rewarded for it down the line, whether it's later in life or ultimately when we get to heaven. And the Bible is very clear about our gifts that we get in heaven, for being strong, for being resilient, for doing that task or that job. We don't really understand why we're doing it or why we have to do something a certain way. So this week, when you go to work, when you're going back to school, whatever it might be, you don't understand why we have to do something. Understand that it's part of a big picture that we may not get. Going through officers training right now for the military, kind of starting to not be so tunnel vision on a certain idea or a certain task, but starting to understand that there's more than just this, but there's stuff happening on your left and your right. And that task that may seem meaningless to the person actually doing it is a huge benefit and a huge help and required for that mission to succeed. When we're lower on the totem pole of work, we may not understand again why we're doing it that way, but it's going to play such a huge role in the grand picture. And our spiritual life is the same way. You know, we may not understand why God is putting us through a certain situation. We may not understand God's purpose and plan for all of this coronavirus stuff. But we do know ultimately that He's going to be glorified through it in one way, shape, or form. We just may not understand it. We may not understand why we have to suffer. Because again, we ask ourselves the question, what's the point? What's the point of going through all of this hard, somewhat meaningless work? You know, one of the things I've really gotten into is running. And when you're in the process, you may not understand the point of going through all of that hard time. But when you get to the finish line, it's so worth it. So worth getting that medal. It's so worth all of the time and effort that we put into it. You know, that's one of my favorite feelings ever, is going out and running a race. And getting to that finish line, getting that medal, whether it's a participation medal or for actually winning the race and having your shirt on and everything like that. But sitting in the car, this is my favorite part, is sitting in the car heading home and remembering all of the hard work that I put in order to complete that goal, in order to complete that run, and all of that hard work ultimately paid off. You know, I encourage you, stay strong. Stay resilient to the hard times of this life, because it's not easy. Keep grinding even though you may not understand what the finished product is going to look like, what it's going to mean for us. The only thing we do know as Christians, and that's something that we as Christians have that non-believers don't have, is we know that if we grind hard spiritually, if we work hard now, that reward when we get to heaven is eternal. It's much better than a finisher's medal of a race. It's much better than a promotion that comes with a corner office and 6 figures. That's temporary. It's going to pass away. Ask yourself that question of what's the point? The point is, I'm glorifying my Heavenly Father. I'm going to be built up through this trial. And I may not see an earthly reward of it, but it's going to be eternal and in heaven. Have a good week.